The silence in our house had a weight to it, a physical presence that pressed down on my shoulders and settled in my chest. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the tense, airless silence that follows a storm, where you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop. For weeks, maybe months, Sarah and I had been orbiting each other like two dying stars, the gravity of our shared history the only thing keeping us from spinning off into the cold, empty darkness. The air was thick with unspoken words, with the ghosts of arguments we were too tired to have. The scent of our home, once a comforting mix of her lavender lotion and the coffee I brewed every morning, now just smelled stale, like a room that had been sealed shut for too long. That night was the culmination of it all. We were in the kitchen, the harsh fluorescent light overhead buzzing faintly, casting sharp, unforgiving shadows on our faces. I was leaning against the counter, the cold granite seeping through my thin t-shirt. My mug of coffee had gone cold hours ago, a dark, bitter ring staining the ceramic. Sarah was sitting at the oak table my grandfather had built, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. The steam had long since vanished. She was staring at a water stain on the wood, her knuckles white. "I just don't understand what you want from me, Mark," she said, her voice so quiet it was almost swallowed by the hum of the refrigerator. It was a brittle sound, like dry leaves skittering across pavement, that I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It came out as a harsh, frustrated sigh. "I want you to be here, Sarah. I mean really here. Not just your body in a chair. When was the last time we actually talked? About anything other than bills or whose turn it is to take out the trash?" She finally looked up at me, and the exhaustion in her eyes was a punch to the gut. They were the same beautiful blue eyes I'd fallen in love with 10 years ago under a string of patio lights at a friend's barbecue, but now they were clouded, distant. "I'm tired, Mark. I'm just so tired. It feels like we're running on a treadmill going nowhere, and the speed just keeps getting faster." "So we stop," I said, my voice rising with a desperation I hated. "We get off the treadmill. We go away for a weekend. We do something. Anything. But we have to do it together." A single tear traced a path down her cheek, shimmering in the cold light. She wiped it away with the back of her hand. "I don't think a weekend can fix this," she whispered. The words hung there between us, heavy and final. The end. It felt like the end. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly seemed deafening, the ticking of the clock on the wall a countdown to our inevitable implosion. I felt a hollow ache spread through my ribs, a familiar grief for what we were losing, for what we'd already lost. I had no more words. I had no fight left. I just nodded, my throat tight, and turned to leave the room, to retreat to my side of the cold, empty bed we shared. "Wait," she said. Her voice was different now. Not brittle, but trembling with something I couldn't place. I stopped, my hand on the doorframe, my back to her. I could hear the scrape of her chair as she stood up, the soft padding of her footsteps on the linoleum floor, that I felt her hand on my arm, her touch hesitant, almost foreign. "Mark, look at me." I turned around slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and searching mine. She took a shaky breath, her other hand coming up to rest on her stomach, a gesture so tender and unconscious it made my heart clench. "There's something I haven't told you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't know how. With everything going on." She took another deep, shuddering breath. "Mark, I'm pregnant." The world stopped. The buzzing of the lights, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, it all faded into a dull, distant roar. Pregnant. The word echoed in the vast, silent cavern that had just been my chest. It was a word I had longed to hear for years, a word we'd chased through doctor's appointments and heartbreaking disappointments, a word I had finally, painfully, given up on. I stared at her hand resting protectively over her abdomen. My mind reeled, trying to catch up. A baby. A tiny, fragile, impossible hope in the middle of all this wreckage. Are you sure?" I stammered, my own voice sounding strange and far away. She nodded, and this time the tears that filled her eyes weren't from sadness. They were shimmering with a desperate, brilliant hope. "I took a test this morning. 2 of them. They were both positive. We're going to have a baby, Mark." And just like that, the crushing weight on my chest lifted. The stale air in the room suddenly felt fresh, electric. I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms, burying my face in her hair. It smelled like lavender again. I held her tight, feeling the frailness of her shoulders, the frantic beat of her heart against my own. The silence was broken, not by arguing, but by my own choked sob of relief. A baby. A baby was going to save us. I was sure of it, that in the weeks that followed, our house transformed. The heavy, oppressive silence was replaced with a low hum of excitement, of purpose. We talked. We actually talked for hours, our voices soft and full of plans in the quiet darkness of our bedroom. We talked about names, about turning the spare room into a nursery, about whether we'd be good parents. The future, which had seemed like a terrifying, blank void, was suddenly filled with color and light that I started coming home from work earlier. The crushing pressure of my job, the endless emails and deadlines that had consumed me, suddenly seemed insignificant. I wanted to be home. I'd walk in the door and the first thing I'd do was look for Sarah, my eyes immediately going to her stomach, searching for a change, for a sign of the new life that was knitting us back together. She seemed to bloom. The tired, hollowed-out look in her eyes was replaced by a soft glow. She smiled more. She'd hum to herself while she cooked, the scent of garlic and herbs once again filling our kitchen. She bought a book of baby names and would read them out loud to me in the evenings, her voice lyrical and happy. We'd argue playfully over them. I wanted a strong, classic name like Benjamin. She wanted something more unique, like Rowan. The arguments were light and full of love, a world away from the bitter, soul-crushing fights we'd been having one Saturday afternoon. The sun was streaming through the living room window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The room felt warm and smelled of lemon polish and fresh laundry. We were sitting on the floor, surrounded by paint swatches for the nursery. What about a soft yellow? Sarah suggested, holding up a little square of paper. Like buttercups. It's cheerful. Good for a boy or a girl. I picked up a pale green one. I like this. It's calming. Like a meadow. I looked at her, at the way the sunlight caught the gold in her hair. I reached out and tucked a stray strand behind her ear, my fingers lingering on the softness of her skin. You're happy, aren't you? She leaned into my touch, her blue eyes soft. I'm so happy, Mark. I feel like we're finally us again. I kissed her then, a long, slow kiss that tasted of hope and second chances. It felt like coming home after a long and brutal war. We were going to be a family. Everything was going to be okay. That my mother was ecstatic. When I called to tell her, she let out a shriek of joy so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Oh, Mark, I'm so thrilled. A grandchild. I was beginning to think you two would never give me one. Her excitement was a warm blanket. We went over for Sunday dinner the next week. The house smelled of roasted chicken and my mom's famous apple pie. She couldn't stop fussing over Sarah, fluffing pillows for her back, offering her glasses of water, telling her to put her feet up. Now, Sarah, you need to be taking your prenatal vitamins, she said, her tone a familiar mix of love and command. My mom was a retired nurse, and she slipped back into medical mode with ease. Folic acid is so important in these first few weeks. Are you getting enough? Of course, Eleanor, Sarah said with a patient smile. I've got the big chalky ones the doctor recommended. And the morning sickness? Is it bad? My mom pressed, her brow furrowed with concern. Sarah placed a hand on her stomach. A little nausea in the mornings, but nothing I can't handle. Toast and ginger ale seemed to do the trick. I watched them, my heart swelling. This was all I'd ever wanted. The easy domestic happiness. The blending of our families in anticipation of a new life. My dad clapped me on the back, a proud, knowing smile on his face. You're going to be a great father, son. But as the weeks turned into a couple of months, a tiny, dissonant chord began to play in the back of my mind. It was faint at first, easy to ignore, drowned out by the symphony of our newfound happiness. The first time I noticed it was when I asked about her first doctor's appointment. How did it go? I asked, kissing the top of her head as she sat on the couch, reading a magazine. Did you get to hear the heartbeat? She looked up, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Panic? I dismissed it as a trick of the light. Oh, it was fine, she said, turning a page. It's still too early for a heartbeat. Dr. Miller said everything looks good, though. Just a routine checkup. Dr. Miller? I thought you were still seeing Dr. Evans. Oh, I switched, she said breezily. Dr. Miller's office is closer to my work. It's just more convenient. It made sense, I guess. I didn't push it. But a few weeks later, she came home, her face glowing. I have something for you, she said, her voice filled with a playful excitement. She pulled a small, black and white photo from her purse. An ultrasound. My breath caught in my throat. I took the photo from her with trembling hands. It was grainy, a swirl of gray and black, but right in the center was a tiny, bean-shaped blob. Our baby. Oh my God, Sarah, I whispered, my eyes stinging. It's real. It's real, she repeated, her arms wrapping around my neck. Our little peanut. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours. I put it on the fridge with a magnet, right at eye level, so I would see it every single day. It was proof. It was our future. The dissonant chord, however, kept playing, getting just a little louder. I wanted to go to the next appointment with her. I cleared my whole schedule for it. I can't wait to go, I told her the night before. I want to be there. I want to hear the heartbeat for myself. She was quiet for a moment, tracing the patterns on the duvet with her finger. Actually, Mark, they had a cancellation, so they moved my appointment up. I went this afternoon, while you were in that big meeting. Disappointment hit me like a splash of cold water. What? Why didn't you call me? I would have left. I didn't want to bother you, she said quickly, her voice a little too bright. It was all very last minute. But everything is great. The heartbeat is strong. 150 beats per minute. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I asked the doctor to record it for you. She played a recording on her phone. A rapid, whooshing sound filled the room. Thump thump, thump thump, thump thump. The sound of a tiny, perfect heart. My disappointment melted away, replaced by awe. I listened to it over and over. The sound of promise of everything to come. We were at the 12-week mark when we decided it was time to tell our wider circle of friends. We had a small get-together at our house. The air was filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. My best friend, Dave, pulled me aside in the kitchen as I was getting more ice. Dave was the kind of friend who could see right through my bullshit. We'd known each other since we were 5 years old. He leaned against the counter, a beer in his hand, and gave me a long, appraising look. "You seem happy, man," he said. "Happier than I've seen you in a long time." "I am," I said, grinning like an idiot. "We're having a baby, Dave." His eyebrows shot up. "No kidding? A baby? Wow. Congratulations, that's amazing." He clapped me on the shoulder, his grip firm. "But are you guys okay? I mean, a few months ago, things seemed pretty rocky." "The baby changed everything," I said with utter conviction. "It's what we needed. It brought us back together." Dave took a slow sip of his beer. "A baby doesn't fix things, Mark. It just adds to them. You know that, right?" "It's different for us," I insisted, a little annoyed by his skepticism. "This is what we've always wanted." He just nodded slowly. "Okay, man. I'm happy for you. Really. I am." But as he walked back into the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't entirely convinced. The tiny seed of doubt Dave had planted began to sprout. I started noticing things. Small inconsistencies. Things I had previously brushed aside. Sarah talked about her pregnancy symptoms, but I never actually saw them. She'd mention morning sickness, but I never heard her being sick. She'd complain about strange food cravings for pickles and ice cream, but when I'd offer to go to the store, she'd wave me off and say the craving had passed, and her body she wasn't changing. She was now supposedly 4 months along, almost 5. She'd started wearing looser tops and empire waist dresses, but when I'd hold her at night, my hands resting on her stomach where our child was supposed to be growing, it still felt flat and firm. There was no gentle swell, no hint of a bump. "Shouldn't you be showing a little by now?" I asked one night, my voice carefully casual. We were lying in bed, the only light coming from the moon filtering through the blinds, casting stripes across the room. Her body tensed under my arm. "Everyone is different," she said, her voice tight. "Dr. Miller said it's perfectly normal, especially with a first baby. I'm just carrying it small, that's all." I tried to believe her. I wanted to believe her more than anything. My sanity, our entire future, depended on it. But the doubt was a poison, seeping into the corners of my mind. The ultrasound picture on the fridge started to look strange to me. I'd stare at it while I made my coffee in the morning. I'm not a doctor, but I'd seen my sister's ultrasounds. They had her name on them, the date, the name of the clinic. This one was just a picture, a generic, anonymous image of a fetus that I did something I'm not proud of. One afternoon, when Sarah was out grocery shopping, I went into her office. My heart was pounding against my ribs, a frantic, guilty rhythm. I felt like a trespasser, a spy in my own home. The room smelled of her perfume and old books. I sat at her desk and opened her laptop. I didn't know her password. I tried her birthday. Nothing. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. Then I tried Benjamin Rowan. It opened. My hands were shaking as I navigated to her search history. My blood ran cold. Realistic silicone pregnancy belly by fake positive pregnancy test ultrasound picture for download fetal heartbeat. Sound effect. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush, as if I'd been punched. I clicked on one of the links. It took me to a website that sold theatrical props. There it was, a range of silicone bellies, meticulously crafted to simulate each trimester of pregnancy. I saw the one she must have bought, the 4 to 5 month model that I stumbled back from the desk, my chair hitting the wall with a dull thud. The room spun. The book of baby names was on the corner of the desk, a pink sticky note marking a page. The paint swatches were still in a little pile on the bookshelf. The whole thing, all of it, was a lie. The past few months flashed through my mind in a dizzying, sickening montage. Her tearful announcement, the happy phone call to my mom, the ultrasound photo, the heartbeat. It was all a performance. A carefully constructed, monstrous lie. The happiness I'd been feeling wasn't real. It was a phantom, built on a foundation of deceit, that I felt a wave of nausea, so intense I had to grip the edge of the desk to keep from falling. I wasn't going to be a father. Our marriage wasn't saved. We were still those two broken people in a silent, sterile kitchen, only now it was so much worse. The hope, the one thing that had been holding me together, had been a cruel illusion that I didn't know what to do. Confront her? The thought of the ensuing scene, the inevitable explosion, made me feel physically ill. I walked through the house like a ghost, touching the things we had bought in our shared delusion. A tiny pair of yellow socks. A soft, gray blanket with little elephants on it. Each object was a fresh stab of pain that I needed proof. Tangible, undeniable proof that I could hold in my hands. Something that couldn't be explained away. I knew where it had to be. That night, I waited until she was sound asleep, her breathing deep, and even beside me in the bed we no longer deserved to share. The air in the room was cool on my skin. I slipped out of bed, my movements slow and silent. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet, each sound amplified in the stillness of the house that I went to our walk-in closet. The air inside was stuffy, smelling of cedar and mothballs. I didn't turn on the light, using the dim glow from my phone screen to see. Her side was neat, her clothes hung in organized rows. At the very back, behind a row of winter coats, was a large cardboard box. It was a box of old college textbooks and memorabilia I hadn't seen in years. It felt heavier than I remembered, that MY heart hammered against my ribs as I lifted it down. It was awkward and heavy, and I nearly dropped it. I carried it out of the closet and into the spare room, the room that was supposed to be the nursery. The moonlight cast a pale, ghostly light into the room, illuminating the bare walls where we had planned to paint buttery yellow stripes. That I set the box down and opened the flaps. On top were old, dusty photo albums. I lifted them out. Underneath was a thick, woolen blanket. And under the blanket, I saw that it was a flesh-colored, molded piece of silicone. It was cool and clammy to the touch, with a strange, unnatural smoothness. It was shaped like the gentle, rounded curve of a pregnant belly. There were straps on the back to hold it in place. It was a grotesque parody of life, a hollow, empty thing designed to deceive that I sank to the floor, the cold silicone prosthetic in my lap. I just sat there in the dark, in the empty room that would never hold a crib, and I felt the last 4 months of my life collapse into a pile of ash. The baby, our second chance, our future, it had never existed. It was all just a prop, a lie I held in my hands, and I didn't know how we could ever come back from this. The silence in the house returned, but this time it was a dead, final silence. The silence of a tomb that I sat there on the floor of the empty nursery for what felt like an eternity, the cold, rubbery weight of the prosthetic in my lap a constant, sickening reminder of the truth. The moonlight shifted, crawling slowly across the bare wooden floor. Every sound in the house seemed magnified, the groan of the pipes, the distant rumble of a truck on the highway, the soft, even sound of Sarah's breathing from our bedroom. She was sleeping peacefully, a deep and dreamless sleep, while my world had been shattered into a million tiny, irreparable pieces that a cold, hard anger began to crystallize in my chest, replacing the initial shock and grief. It was an anger so pure and white-hot it burned away the tears. How could she do this? How could she build such an elaborate, cruel fantasy and invite me to live in it? She hadn't just lied to me. She had taken my deepest, most vulnerable hope and used it as a tool. She had manipulated my love, my grief over our childlessness, my desperation to save our marriage. She had made a mockery of it all that I thought about our friends, our family. My mother's joyous shrieks over the phone. My dad's proud hand on my shoulder. The knowing smiles, the heartfelt congratulations. I had shared this phantom joy with all of them, and now I was the fool who had to unravel the story, to explain the inexplicable. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that spread up my neck and across my face that I finally stood up, my legs stiff and numb. I placed the silicone belly back in the box, handling it as if it were a venomous snake. I closed the flaps and pushed the box into the corner of the room, a piece of evidence in a crime scene. I couldn't confront her now, not in the middle of the night. This conversation, this final, marriage-ending confrontation, needed the harsh, unforgiving light of day that I didn't go back to our bed. I couldn't bear the thought of lying next to her, of feeling the warmth of her body, of breathing the same air. I went downstairs and collapsed onto the living room sofa. The leather was cool against my feverish skin. I stared up at the ceiling, watching the shadows dance as cars passed by outside, their headlights sweeping across the walls. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, my mind replaying every conversation, every smile, every touch from the last 4 months, searching for the tells, the cracks in her performance. They were all there, so obvious now. Her vague answers, her convenient appointment changes, the generic ultrasound photo. I had been so blinded by want, so desperate to believe, that I had walked willingly into her web of lies. The sun rose, painting the sky in pale shades of gray and pink. I heard the floorboards creak upstairs, the sound of the shower running, the familiar morning routine that now felt like a scene from a stranger's life. My stomach churned. The smell of coffee, a scent I usually loved, was nauseating. She came downstairs about an hour later. She was dressed in a loose-fitting sundress, her hair still damp. She was humming that same little tune she'd been humming for weeks. She stopped short when she saw me on the couch, a frown creasing her forehead. "Mark, what are you doing down here? I woke up and you were gone." I didn't answer. I just looked at her. I watched her as she walked into the kitchen, the fabric of her dress flowing around her. I saw her hand go to her flat stomach in that now-practiced, maternal gesture. The sight of it sent a fresh jolt of rage through me. "I made coffee," she said, her voice bright and cheerful. It grated on my raw nerves like sandpaper that I stood up from the couch, my movements slow and deliberate. I walked into the kitchen and stood on the other side of the island, creating a barrier between us. The morning light streamed in, illuminating the ultrasound picture still stuck to the refrigerator door. "We need to talk, Sarah," I said. My voice was low and flat, devoid of any emotion. It was a terrifyingly calm sound, even to my own ears. She looked at me, her cheerful facade starting to crumble under the weight of my gaze. "Okay," she said slowly. "Is everything all right? You're scaring me." "Am I?" I asked, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping my lips. "That's funny. I'm the one who should be scared. I've been living in a horror movie for the last 4 months, and I didn't even know it." Her eyes widened. The color drained from her face. She knew. She knew that I knew. I saw the flicker of panic, the frantic search for an escape route. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, her hand gripping the edge of the counter. "Don't you?" I said, my voice rising. The dam of my forced composure was beginning to crack. "Let's talk about the nursery, Sarah. The buttery yellow paint we were going to use. Let's talk about Benjamin or Rowan. Let's talk about the strong, 150 beats per minute heartbeat of our child." Each word was a hammer blow. She flinched, her whole body seeming to shrink in on itself. "Mark, please," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "No, don't you, Mark, please me." I slammed my hand down on the granite countertop. The coffee mugs rattled in the dish drainer. The sound echoed in the tense silence. "Don't you dare cry. You don't get to cry." The tears, the smiles, the morning sickness, was any of it real? Or was it all just part of the show? I walked around the island, closing the distance between us. She backed away until her back was pressed against the refrigerator, right next to the fraudulent ultrasound picture. "I found it, Sarah," I said, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "In the closet. The belly. The prop you used to sell your little story. How long did you think you could keep it up? Another few months? Were you going to stage a miscarriage? Is that the grand finale you had planned for us?" A choked sob broke from her lips. She slid down the front of the refrigerator until she was crumpled on the floor, her face in her hands. Her shoulders shook with wrenching sobs. It was a pathetic, broken sight, but I felt nothing. My heart was a cold, dead stone in my chest. "Why?" I demanded, standing over her. "Just tell me why. Why would you do this to me? To us?" Her voice was muffled by her hands, a torrent of desperate, broken words. "I was losing you. I felt you slipping away every single day. The silence in this house was so loud I couldn't breathe. I was so scared. I just wanted us to be happy again, the way we used to be." "Happy?" I yelled, the sound raw and torn from my throat. "You call this happy? This sick fantasy? This wasn't happiness, Sarah. It was a lie. A lie you built on my deepest pain. It worked, didn't it? She cried, looking up at me, her face streaked with tears and makeup. For a little while it worked. You were home more. You looked at me again. You smiled at me. We were talking, we were laughing. I just wanted that. I wanted you back. The desperate, twisted logic of it was staggering. She saw the lie as a success. She saw the joy it created as real, even though the foundation was rotten. She hadn't just deceived me, she had deceived herself. So you faked a pregnancy, I said, the words tasting like poison. You bought a fake belly and a fake ultrasound, and you played me like a fool because you were lonely. Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just lie about a baby. You killed it. You created this beautiful, perfect idea, this hope, and you let me love it. And then you killed it. You made me grieve for a child that never even existed. The full weight of that realization hit me then. I was mourning. I was mourning the loss of a son or a daughter I had already pictured in my mind. I had imagined holding them, teaching them to ride a bike, watching them grow up. Sarah hadn't just broken my trust. She had broken my heart in the most profound and twisted way imaginable that I backed away from her. A sudden, urgent need for space, for air. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't be in the same room. The kitchen, once the heart of our home, felt like a cage. I can't do this, I whispered, more to myself than to her. I can't be here. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, grabbing my keys and wallet from the small table by the door. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to leave. Mark, wait, she screamed from the floor. Please don't go. We can fix this. I can fix this. I stopped at the front door, my hand on the knob. I turned back to look at her, a crumpled heap on the kitchen floor, the morning sun cruelly illuminating her tear-stained face. Fix this? I said, and my voice was a dead, hollow thing. You can't fix this, Sarah. Some things are too broken to be fixed. I opened the door and walked out, not looking back. The morning air was cool and fresh, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere of the house. I got in my car and drove, the familiar suburban streets blurring into a meaningless landscape through my tear-filled eyes. I drove for hours, with no destination, the engine's hum a poor substitute for the deafening silence that had taken over my life. The baby hadn't saved us. It had destroyed us. And I was now completely, utterly alone, adrift in the wreckage of a life that had been a lie that I ended up at a cheap motel about 100 miles from home. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner, a scent so bleak it perfectly matched my mood. The bedspread was a faded, scratchy floral pattern, and the air conditioner in the window rattled like it was on its last legs. I sat on the edge of the bed for hours, the television flickering with a mindless daytime game show, the sounds of manufactured laughter and applause feeling like an assault. That MY phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. Dozens of calls from Sarah. A few from my mom, probably wondering why I wasn't at work. Texts flooded in. Mark, please call me. I'm so sorry. We can talk about this. Don't throw us away. I silenced it. I couldn't hear her voice. I couldn't read her words. Each one was a twist of the knife that I finally picked up when Dave's name flashed on the screen. His voice was a lifeline in the churning chaos of my head. Mark? Where the hell are you? Sarah called your mom called me. Everyone's freaking out. My own voice was a croak. I'm at a motel. I just had to get out of there. Out of where? What's going on? Did you two have a fight? I took a deep, shuddering breath, and the whole sordid story came pouring out. The lie, the fake belly, the downloaded ultrasound picture, the sound effect of a heartbeat. I told him everything, the words tumbling over each other in a messy, painful confession. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Dave? You there? Yeah, man. I'm here, he finally said, his voice low with disbelief. Jesus Christ, Mark. I don't even know what to say. That's insane. Tell me about it, I said, a bitter laugh catching in my throat. I've been living in a goddamn movie. A really, really sick one. So what are you going to do? He asked. I have no idea, I admitted, rubbing my tired, burning eyes. I can't go back there. I can't look at her. Every time I close my eyes, I see that thing. That fake belly. And I see her smiling face, telling me she's pregnant. It was all a game. You need to get some sleep, man, Dave said, his voice practical and grounding. You sound like you're about to fall apart. Text me the address of that motel. I'm coming to get you. You can stay at my place for a few days. We'll figure this out. The relief that washed over me was so immense my knees felt weak. I wasn't alone in this. I had someone. An hour later, Dave was there. He didn't say much, just took my car keys, threw my single, hastily packed bag in his trunk, and drove me back toward the city. We stopped for greasy diner food on the way, and I ate for the first time all day, the bland taste of a grilled cheese and the warmth of a coffee a small comfort. Staying at Dave's was strange. His bachelor pad was all clean lines, dark leather, and the faint smell of his cologne. It was the antithesis of the cozy, domestic life I thought I'd been building. Sleeping on his couch, I felt like I was 22 again, lost and directionless, except now I was carrying the baggage of a shattered 10-year relationship. The hardest part was telling my parents. I drove to their house 2 days later. The Sunday dinner atmosphere was gone. My mom knew something was terribly wrong. I sat them down in their living room, the one I grew up in, surrounded by photos of happier times. Me as a kid, my high school graduation, my wedding picture. That photo of me and Sarah, smiling, so full of hope and promise, seemed to mock me from the mantelpiece that I told them the truth, my voice flat and hollow. I watched the joy drain from my mother's face, replaced by a horrified disbelief. She put a hand to her mouth, her eyes welling with tears, not for the grandchild she was losing, but for the pain I was in. My dad just sat there, his face like stone, his jaw tight with a barely controlled anger. She pretended? My mom whispered, her voice trembling. The whole thing. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. That poor, sick girl, my mom said, shaking her head. What could possibly drive someone to do something so cruel? My dad's reaction was different. It's not cruel, Eleanor. It's monstrous. That's what it is. He looked at me, his eyes hard. You're not going back there, are you, Mark? I don't know what I'm doing, I confessed. My name is on the mortgage. Half of everything we own is in that house. Our whole life is there. It's just stuff, son, he said, his voice softening slightly. You can get more stuff. You can't get back your sanity. A week after I left, I agreed to meet Sarah. Not at our house. I still couldn't bring myself to go back there, but at a quiet, neutral coffee shop halfway between Dave's apartment and our home. I got there first, choosing a small table in a secluded corner. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and steamed milk. It was a normal, everyday place, filled with people on their laptops, friends catching up. It felt surreal, like I was an actor on the wrong set. When she walked in, I barely recognized her. The soft, happy glow she'd been faking for months was gone. She was pale and thin, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. She looked like the woman I'd shared that tense kitchen with before the lie began, only 100 times more broken. She sat down opposite me, her hands trembling as she placed her purse on the empty chair. Thank you for meeting me, she said, her voice a raw whisper. I'm only here because we have to figure out the logistics, Sarah. The house. The accounts. That's it. Tears immediately filled her eyes, and she looked down at her hands, twisting a napkin into a shredded mess. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to listen to me. Please. Not to forgive me. Just to understand. I stayed silent, my expression a cold, hard mask. She took a shaky breath. I know what I did was wrong. It was crazy. It started so small. I saw how distant you were, how unhappy we both were. I was terrified I was going to lose you. That night in the kitchen, when I thought it was over, I just panicked. The word just came out of my mouth. I saw the look on your face change. I saw the hope. And it was like a drug, Mark. For the first time in so long, you looked at me. You saw me. She looked up, her gaze pleading. And once I said it, I couldn't take it back. So I leaned into it. I bought the test online. And then when you wanted to see an ultrasound, I found one online. Each lie was just to cover up the last one. I was building this fantasy world, and it was the only place we were happy. I started to believe it myself, almost. I loved the way you looked at me, the way you'd put your hand on my stomach. I loved being the person who was giving you the one thing you wanted most in the world. I was so lost in the lie I didn't know how to find my way out. She finally broke down, her quiet sobs drawing a few glances from other patrons. I started seeing a therapist, Mark, the day after you left. She said I have issues with codependency, with a desperate fear of abandonment. That doesn't excuse what I did. Nothing can. But it's a reason. I was sick. I needed help, and instead of asking for it, I did something terrible and unforgivable. Listening to her, the white-hot anger I'd been nursing for a week began to cool, leaving a vast, empty ache in its place. I didn't see a monster sitting across from me. I saw a deeply broken and pathetic person who had done a monstrous thing out of desperation and fear. I felt a sliver of pity for her, which was almost more painful than the anger. "I'm glad you're getting help, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You need it, but it doesn't change anything for me. For us. You didn't just tell a lie. You took a shared dream, a dream we mourned together, and you weaponized it. You used my own heart against me. I will never, ever be able to trust you again. I'll never be able to look at you and not see the lie." The finality in my voice was absolute. She seemed to understand. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know," she whispered. "I destroyed us." We talked for another hour, the conversation shifting to the sad, sterile details of separation. Lawyers. Selling the house. Dividing a decade of a shared life into two separate, lonely piles. It was like planning a funeral that I left that coffee shop feeling hollowed out. There was no victory, no satisfaction. Just a profound, soul-deep sadness for the man I was before the lie, and for the woman Sarah could have been if she had just talked to me instead of creating a fantasy. Months have passed. We sold the house. The process was a painful inventory of our failed marriage. Packing up the photos, the furniture we'd picked out together, the little souvenirs from our vacations. The hardest part was dismantling the empty room that was supposed to have been the nursery. I found the little pair of yellow socks I had bought, and I held them in my hand for a long time before putting them in a donation box that I have my own apartment now. It's clean and sparse, and it feels more like a hotel than a home. It's quiet, but it's a peaceful quiet, not the tense, suffocating silence of my last months with Sarah. I'm in therapy too, trying to unpack my own part in our marriage's failure. I wasn't blameless. I had been distant, buried in my work, emotionally unavailable. I had helped create the void that Sarah had tried to fill with her desperate, catastrophic lie. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, I think about that ultrasound picture, the grainy, black and white image of a life that never was. It's strange to grieve for something that was never real. But the hope was real. The love was real. And the pain of losing it all is the most real thing I've ever felt. I don't know what the future holds, or if I'll ever be able to trust someone so completely again. The wound is deep. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I'm living in the truth, no matter how painful and lonely it might be. And I have to believe that's a start.